Welcome everyone to the VIA Knowledge Hub podcast. I'm your host, Heidi Trost, and I'm joined by George Finney today. George, welcome.
Howdy. It's so good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Howdy means you are definitely coming from Austin, Texas, yeah?
Indeed, yeah.
So George is, if you've never heard of his name, welcome. Welcome to the modern world. He's the Chief Information Security Officer at the University of Texas System. He is the CEO and co-founder of WellAware Security. And you may have read some of George's books. If not, you can pause the podcast and go and order these books right now. So Project Zero Trust, Rise of the Machines, and WellAware. And what's really cool about George's books, I'm sure he won't, just a pause for a little advertisement here. What's really fun about the books are the storytelling element. And I think as security practitioners, especially, or even just talking to stakeholders, like thinking about how can you tell a story? How can you, make this resonate with folks? So George does an incredible job at that. So welcome again, George. Really excited to dive into something that's kind of controversial sometimes, right? I was saying before as we were talking, I as a good researcher, I went to Reddit to learn all about what people think about zero trust. So we've got some spicy hot takes to unpack.
I'm so excited. I love that zero trust is kind of controversial, but we're going to break it down.
Yeah, totally. Okay, love it. All right, so just quick intro. What is zero trust? Could you explain it in a sentence?
So I think this is a perfect place to start because, in part, everyone who's ever been a marketer has thrown their spin on zero trust. So
as marketers do,
right? which is totally understandable, and I think it's really helped get the word out about zero trust. So thank you to all of those marketers out there for helping us get the word out. But the definition that I use, and by the way, I collaborated with the creator of Zero Trust to write Project Zero Trust and Rise of the Machines. So this is his definition. I tend to agree with it in my practice as a CISO, but zero trust is a strategy for preventing or containing breaches by removing the trust relationships that we have in digital systems. So one sentence, easy to understand. And I think it as a strategy, right? It's something that us as CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers, have to own as a part of our whole program. If you really want to get controversial, I will argue that there is not another strategy when it comes to cybersecurity.
I was thinking about the meme where the guy's sitting at the table and he's got like the white sign up and he's like, "Prove me wrong."
Change my mind.
Change my mind. There's not another strategy. I wanted to unpack one. There were actually two words: trust relationships. Can you define like what that means and maybe give us an example?
Absolutely. So the probably the simplest rule, and probably the most common actually as it relates to practitioners out there. I know I've seen this a bunch of times, right? So let's say there's an admin out there, server admin or whatever kind of admin. Do they have a hole poked in the firewall? So they can get direct access from their desktop without a VPN or anything else to manage those servers.
That sounds super convenient, George. I don't know where you're going with this.
Incredibly convenient for the cyber criminals when they compromise that admin's device. They're really good at finding those kinds of holes. In security speak, we might call that an attack path. But really, what you've created is a trust relationship between those digital systems. And in this case, it's probably usually for the sake of convenience.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I think unlocking kind of that piece of the of how you describe zero trust, just like unlocks like a mental blocker. I think like when I was starting to learn about zero trust, like that was one of the things I was like, oh, I get it. Now that makes sense. Thinking about like where those boundaries are, like where the, like one system meets another, and like what that, like you said, what that attack path could be.
Exactly.
What are some of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to zero trust?
I think I like to start with, people kind of make fun of it, right? I've spoken at conferences all over the world. And one of the most common things I get is like, well, we shouldn't trust people. And, remember the definition. It's about digital systems and trust, right? We have to be able to collaborate with one another, and to be able to have teams, right? You might have, all different kinds of admins, antivirus, firewall, developer, identity, the help desk, right? Everyone needs to be able to work together.
And it reminds me of like trust no one.
Yeah, I mean, X-Files, right? You got David Duchovny, Fox Mulder with the poster behind him. That's not what this is about.
Oh man, I thought we were going to talk about the X-Files.
Well, if this becomes an X-Files podcast, I'm there for it.
Me too.
But
plot twist, we're going to be doing an X-Files show.
I mean, I would also say zero trust isn't a tool, right? That's a big misconception. Again, you've got vendors selling you, hey, buy this zero trust product, and all your problems will be solved. Obviously, if someone's selling you a magic bullet, it's snake oil. Don't that's not going to help you. And I think a big one of those marketing analyst firms out there has started to call zero trust an architecture. And while I think it's interesting, I think certainly architecture is a part of your overall strategy. But the strategy encompasses a lot more than just architecture. So I think in that context, you've got to kind of start to break down, where tools fit into your strategy, right? You've got tactics, but strategy kind of helps bring all of the tactics together in a cohesive way for your specific organization. And there is no one size fits all approach.
Do we want to? That's super interesting. I love like hearing, because like architecture, zero trust architecture wasn't part of John Kindervaag's like original. I almost like want to call it like a manifesto.
Yeah.
Like it's like, right.
I mean, it kind of was. I mean, I'm picturing, Jerry Maguire, right? I'm picturing John, writing, I gotta, but really, so again, I'm going to give a plug for Texas. Zero trust was invented in Texas, right? That's where John's from, so, this is a Lone Star original here. But right, he coined the phrase in his seminal paper, "No more Chewy centers." You can Google that. It's the thing that comes up. But it didn't become an architecture. That really didn't, wasn't the defining term until one of the big analyst firms, who I'm talking about, put their own version of it. Right. It wasn't. It was Forrester that kind of coined the term. Their other competitor chose to get into that, and they're all about vendor marketing, right? So they created a vendor category around architecture.
Yeah. Okay. So in order to illustrate our point, so my next just as a foreshadowing, I was like, what's the word? Foreshadowing. To foreshadow what we're going to be talking about, because I want you to break down, right, some of the zero trust principles. I wanted to go to my notes, go to my notes from Reddit, and talk about some of the things that are the people have spoken.
I'm excited to hear what people have
said. So one user says, I recently asked about the difference between zero trust and the principle of least privilege. The answers I basically got were they were the same thing, or two sides of the same coin.
I think that's not necessarily wrong. So really, going back to John's original paper about what zero trust is, it brings together a lot of different things, right? So the two words, right, zero trust, help us distill down the best practices of all of cybersecurity into one kind of cohesive thing that we can easily communicate with other stakeholders who aren't security nerds, right? We want to make security approachable. So certainly, least privilege is a part of it, particularly where you come into identity, and identity is one of the cornerstones of zero trust, right?
And let's break down least privilege. I know it's like, it sort of sounds like everyone should know it, but like, well, let's just define what the principle of least privilege is.
So I think probably at this point in everyone's lives, you've probably seen a movie where spies were involved, and they really needed to know a piece of information, and somebody said, you the secret is on a need to know basis, and you don't have a need to know.
That's basically my entire life is just people telling me, no, you don't need to know.
So it's like that, right? So I mean, and separation of duties is another way that people talk about it, right? So you want to have, in some instances, if you're an accountant, you don't need information to look at IT configuration documents, or you don't need access into your general counsel's office legal files, right? That's least privilege. Sometimes we do it by group. Sometimes we do a little bit more granular than that. Folks have probably heard the term role-based access control. So certainly that's one pillar, right? There are 4 pillars of zero trust, of John's initial conception of zero trust. It's really about aligning with the business. That's the first pillar. Understanding the business's risk tolerance and industry and how they make money, so that you can tailor your security program to the business. The second pillar, and actually, there's probably another quote in there on Reddit at some point, like, zero trust is just micro-segmentation. Why don't we just call it that? Well,
that was one of them. How did you know? Wow, you did research on Reddit too.
So right. Okay. Well, what's micro-segmentation? Well, it's pretty straightforward in a way, right? You want to compartmentalize information or data or networks. So, in the, olden times, 15, 20 years ago, people just had one firewall.
The early 2000s.
It was yeah, exactly. We've advanced so far since then, but it's this castle model where you had the big walls once you get inside, right? So, I always love this concept because, like, whenever I picture, the castle and the moat and whatever, okay, cool. But like, if you've ever been to a Renaissance fair, randomly, sometimes people will show up.
How did you know that?
If you've been to a Renaissance fair randomly, and I'm probably one of the people that's done this, like, you'll get random people in Star Trek costumes, right? Picture, some Trekkies beaming in essentially to the center of your castle. What do you do now? They're already in the middle. They've got their tricorders or phasers or whatever.
Those Trekkies, they're always making problems, right?
So if you had micro-segmented your castle, they'd be locked to one section of the castle, and they could only see, right? That's what micro-segmentation is. At the time, there was another phrase, deperimeterization, right? Again, moving away from the castle wall. So the probably the easiest way that I can describe is M&Ms, right? They have the crunchy outside and the chewy inside.
I literally pictured wrapper M&M.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
and then I was like, wait.
It's an M&M. But instead, what we're trying to do is make jawbreakers, right? It's hard all the way through. Again, going back to the definition I had, right? Zero trust is a strategy for preventing or containing breaches. If we didn't do enough or just it wasn't feasible to prevent, containing, right? So if you've got different micro-segmented sections, maybe you're putting your specific types of data in a section. Okay, if that one thing got compromised or breached, that's bad, but it didn't spread to the rest of your network, right? You got ransomed. Hopefully you haven't been through that, but well, we limit it to this one department or this one facility or whatever you want. So that's another pillar. Obviously, least privilege is a pillar, but also logging is the fourth pillar. In order to do a good enough job as security team members, we need to have that intel. The hardest question I've ever gotten asked, and this has happened to me at the beginning of my career, is just, something happens, and then naturally an executive will ask, like, well, what happened? How did it happen? If I can't answer those questions, I'm in a really bad place. So right. The final pillar is log everything. In practice, right, I mean, maybe that's not possible to do. Debug logs, obviously, on databases or whatever are challenging. So understanding that is a process, but you've got to be able to have all of that info, not just to answer what went wrong, but to be able to proactively identify issues where right. you've got gaps in coverage, so that you can go back to your least privilege, or you can go back to your micro-segmentation or your alignment with the business, and iterate, so that you can continue to move towards zero. So again, I think certainly there are pillars, but that's the overall view of zero trust, right? It's very inclusive of all of the best practices that we've tried to been pulling together for security for forever.
What I really like about the 4 pillars, and just to recap what you just said, is really understanding the business outcomes. Like, how does the business make money? If you don't understand that and you can't speak that, like, first of all, you can't move on to the second pillar because you don't know what's important. You don't know what data is important, but also, like, to talk to executives and to make sure that the system, whatever you implement, is actually going to work for the business. And then the second piece is to start from the inside out, right? Like, start with the data. And that was really important to me. And it's how I think about security products and, like, their effectiveness right now. I think about, are they actually implementing a strategy that starts with the data and protects, like, puts that force field around the data? Otherwise, I'm like, then you don't know what you're doing. Right?
That's exactly it. So how I like to describe it is, often with security, we fall into the trap of worrying about what could go wrong, which is an important discipline to be able to do. However, with zero trust, we ask the opposite question, like, what has to go right for the business, so that we're aligned with it, right? You need to really understand what the crown jewels really are, what data is important to the business, and are we protecting that the way that the business needs it to be done?
Yeah. And the third piece is, who gets access to what, right? And I, like, go back to your spy analogy, and I think about, like, we can't lose what we don't have access to, right? Like, a threat actor can't get what we don't have access to.
Totally.
So I think about, like, for that spy analogy, right? Like, if I'm being tortured in the torture chamber, but if I don't know the information, then I can't possibly give it up, right?
Exactly.
And then, of course, like, the fourth is logging. And I really like that, from, thinking about it from, like, how do we clean up this mess, and, like, how do we understand what happened? How do we explain this to executives, to, regulators? And also what you said before, like, it's an iterative process. What can we learn from something that might have happened, so that we can go back and alter our strategy moving forward? So awesome. Love it. So, okay. So we just recapped. This is Heidi's learning lesson too, right? Like, this kind of reinforces everything for me as well. So I really, really like walking through this with you. It feels like, it's like I'm getting my own personal tutor on zero trust. I love it. Okay, so I want to read another thing that a Redditor said. Yes, they said, kind of hate it. But every time I've seen it in action, it always comes down to one guy or one team that holds all the essential keys, and that guy or team becomes the bottleneck of the entire organization. Becomes overloaded with requests, or basic stuff like, I need this specific permission to do this thing. So they view zero trust, like, as this bottleneck. I also understand like developers, engineers, right? Like see security, just like security in general, like as a bottleneck. This is making me go slower. I'm supposed to do this thing. I'm supposed to accomplish this task, and you are putting barriers in front of me. I don't like that, right?
Well, you reminded me. I don't know what it was that you said, but what is it? The old Saturday Night Live sketch where they were like, "Hated it." Um, I mean, I've actually talked to some,
That's another good meme too. I hated it.
so I mean, I've talked to some CISOs that have rolled out zero trust, and they were aware of the emotional baggage around those two words, and so they'll call it other things. They're still doing zero trust.
No, what do they call it? What are these other words?
I mean, I think gosh, I've heard adaptive trust. I've heard, trust first, or I mean, variations on the term trust.
Yeah.
But and again, I think those are all conscious attempts to help collaborate better with engineers. So, and I've talked to developers, right? I did, for all the books I write, I do a number of interviews because I'm not an expert in everything, right? So, I have to.
Don't tell people. No, I'm just you're supposed to keep that to yourself.
Well, I mean, like, so I'm not a developer, right? So how do I understand how developers work? And I mean,
Right.
so I was particularly inspired for my book, Project Zero.
Well, in your books, like you encompass a variety of different job roles, which I imagine you had to under. Yeah.
When I'm writing Project Zero Trust, I was very inspired by the book, The Phoenix Project by Gene Kim.
Mm-hmm.
Similar approach. They tell a story, and it's interesting. So if you've read Project or Phoenix Project, you'll know that Gene Kim, the bad guy in the book, The Phoenix Project, was the security team, the CISO. So thank you for that, Gene.
Shock.
I really appreciate it. And so, but as I was writing my book, the difference is, in cybersecurity, the bad guys are the bad guys, right? And so, and as I'm interviewing these developers, they're like, look, it's not that developers don't want to do security. We value it. It's important. But we also like getting a paycheck, and we have deadlines, and the business decides the criticality of new features or what have you, right? Those are really important details to consider. But also, we like getting paychecks. At the end of the day, cyber is an existential threat to your business. So you go through a breach. I mean, we've seen companies that have to do layoffs or go out of business because of a major incident. So we've got to take that seriously too. And at the end of the day, again, it's up to the business to decide. You want to be well integrated into that. However, there really does need to be a good collaborative risk discussion. And is it okay to push out a deadline by a few weeks in order to make sure that you get a critical bug fix that could be exploited? Well, I mean, we want to have that conversation, and I think there are great ways to integrate security into the if you're a developer, we can include security controls in the CI/CD pipeline. So that it's automated, so that it's already part of the process, and you're checking for things like, did a developer include a hard-coded password in the code, right? Did we hard-code IP addresses that could be exposed to an attacker and used as a way of getting back to us, right? So those kinds of things can be integrated into the process that don't slow folks down. And aren't a bottleneck. I mean, again, Phoenix Project developer, the bottleneck was some guy named Brent, and he had all. Well, I mean, again, that's something that the business needs to understand and help from a program management or a process perspective.
Right. I was going to say the problem was the process, right? Like it wasn't even just like the individual. It was like the problem was the process.
Exactly.
I think that's kind of like the same kind of flavor here. I'm curious, can you like envision or like imagine a team that's doing this really well, that's making it super seamless, has integrated security into their pipeline, and describe what that looks like?
Yeah. So, again, let me just state it outright, right? Security, a myth, and that people kind of have accepted is that, it's got to be a trade-off, like security or, performance, security
Right.
or usability. And I think the opposite is actually true. I think it's security and. I think you can deliver better security outcomes by partnering with folks, and you can have win-wins. To so a great example of this is gosh, we wanted to do or a colleague of mine shared a story where we wanted to partner with the CIO to do something, and we upgraded a service to a new thing, and we included security at the same time that we got better performance. SSO, really great example, right? Security doesn't want people to have to type in their passwords 50 or 100 times a day. This doesn't help me do my job. So things like SSO or MFA, are they're like peanut butter and jelly. They go together. So and I've talked to security folks, frankly, that are like, oh, we shouldn't do SSO because, well, doesn't cause problems with security. Actually, this is one of those opportunities where it is a win-win. Where, gosh, I can get all of my apps in one portal, and at the same time, I can include in that SSO my MFA package, so that as you're deploying, you get an incentive for everybody to stop having to enter multiple passwords all the time, and you get to ensure that all of your applications have MFA enabled on them at the same time. This is a win-win.
Yeah.
Right. And by the way, you also get, better logging and intelligence from having all of that in one place.
Well, it kind of sounds like it's a two-way street, right? Like, so security practitioners need to be open, open to change and open to listening. And then the engineers also need to help the security team understand, like, hey, like, this is my workflow. Here are all of these moments where, I encounter these roadblocks, and it's really,
right.
it's,
right.
Basically like messing up my productivity. Are there things that we can do? But I talk a lot about this in my book, actually, about like in human-centered security, that you need both sides to come together, because the security team understands security, right? And is thinking of it from that lens, and maybe have encountered like different solutions that might help solve for specific problems. And then the engineering team is thinking it obviously from the engineering perspective. They understand their workflow, and it's only when you combine those forces that you have all of the information that you need in order to make a decision that makes sense for everyone, that is both usable and secure.
And, you've heard it said before, right? People say people are the weakest link. And, I think the better way to say it is people are the only link, right? It's not people, processes, and technology. It's just people. People are the ones that create the technology and configure the technology and use it. People are ones that create the processes and follow the processes or not. So if, again, people are the most important part of security and zero trust. And honestly, like I've had the privilege of being able to travel around the world to talk to CISOs about zero trust. And I've asked them, what's the most common reason your zero trust project has failed? And 100% of the time, it's been about politics and silos. And the better that you can have a collaborative working relationship with your other partners, whether they're developers or CIOs or CTOs or whoever it is to have that collegial partnership to be able to solve problems together, and be focused, right? And that's again another reason why I wrote the book as a story. Is because, right, we want to be more approachable when it comes to security, and we want to show how everyone can be a part of that team.
Yeah, So engineers, go and talk to your security team and maybe buy them a drink, buy them a coffee, and figure it out.
Indeed.
Okay, I want to switch gears to kind of like another hot take. So the different flavors of this were found on, the people have spoken on Reddit. Basically just like, I don't trust zero trust marketing, which is kind of what you talked about at the beginning, right? Like marketers take things and they ruin it 100% of the time. Okay, so when a vendor claims that they do zero trust, right? I put this in air quotes because, gosh, if I had a nickel for every time I saw that, pay for my retirement. What is like the one question that instantly would separate a real capability from just like a marketing buzzword?
Yeah.
How do you sift through that?
I really like to think about how whatever tool is being sold or whatever vendor is coming, how does that service or product or whatever it is integrate into my whole security stack? So, maybe it solves a niche problem, but how do I get that back into my SIM? How do I get my SOC to be able to operationalize those alerts that I may be getting? How does my team, leverage it? Because again, the tools are tactics. So we want to, focus on solving the bigger issue.
So if that vendor can't answer that, like if it's obvious that they have not thought about how they're going to integrate into your system, then it's pretty obvious that they have no idea what they're talking about.
Exactly. And, I think another great question for vendors is, there's a whole category of products. They're called SASE. Oh my
Sassy.
God. Yeah, exactly. I knew that you'd appreciate this. But I mean, it's
not spelled SASSY, SASE.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there are lots of vendors out there that do this. People are, hate on VPNs, and, I get it. But they're selling SASE tools essentially as, the zero trust magic bullet. Okay, cool. Maybe if it's in your stack, great. But we also have to ask the question. I don't trust vendors. Again, I think we've seen attacks on MSSPs or third parties increase dramatically. So I mean, probably perhaps the majority of breaches these days are targeting vendors because they know they're working across hundreds or thousands of customers, and it's easier to compromise one vendor and get 1,000 customers' data versus doing individual company by company. So if you're a SASE vendor, as an example, oops. Aren't I just moving the target on where trust is, and isn't it harder to know whether the vendor is getting security?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, that kind of it adds a lot more complexity, right, to zero trust.
Indeed.
Yeah. I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about AI. And if folks haven't heard, this is called artificial intelligence. George has a few things to say about it. So one thing that a quote that I heard you say on a different podcast was, AI is built on 100% trust, which is exactly why it needs zero trust. So I was hoping you could unpack that. And then you had a really cool restaurant analogy. So I'm hoping that you can sprinkle that in too.
So for the folks following along at home, Project Zero Trust was the first book. We kind of created this fictional company and characters as a case study into how to go about doing a zero trust project. And there were several things in the intervening couple of years since the book had come out that we wanted to address, like that we just couldn't, like mergers and acquisitions and zero trust. What is that? Can we do something about that? Cool, like business continuity. That's another thing we wanted to cover. But obviously, the biggest thing that came out is artificial intelligence, and in terms of chatbots or LLMs or driverless cars or whatever your business is doing, and so we wanted a way to kind of dispel some of the myths to again make security approachable, because you've probably heard the old saying, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And we're thinking about AI as though it's magic, and it's not. It's like really crazy math, but it's it's still the same thing. And I mean, the short answer is zero trust is probably the best way to secure AI. But there's a fundamental change in the way that AI works in terms of technology that do separate it from the rest of the technologies that have come before, and the separation really is about so there for years, right, we've had a data plane and a control plane. So you think about how firewalls work, or routers, or switches, or even HTML, right? There's a data plane where you share the data your user traffic is going through, but the control plane is really about control, right? It's how to display in a browser window, communicate back to the server. It's about how to configure the firewall and how what routing protocols or whatever you're wanting to use. And we had a control plane for security, right? It was to help prevent user traffic from messing up the operation of the device. And the fundamental shift that we did with AI is to merge the data plane and the control plane. So now if you're talking into an LLM, your chat are the commands that the operation is coming back with. So essentially that means that we've hit 100% trust with AI. Which again, maybe that's what had to happen to enable the technology. No judgments here, but in order to be able to secure it, right, we need, it's the same strategy. It's about removing the trust relationships we have in digital systems. So how do we do that with AI? There are things like AI firewalls. Again, we're thinking about integrating it into our security stack. So we want to be able to get logs, send it into our SIM. Right, we've heard these things that are called guardrails in AI, so we want to be able to capture those. All of the marketing things that you've seen from researchers who work for vendors, and it's really marketing. We found this new prompt injection style attack, and we can exfiltrate the data. Well, what's happening with prompt injection is somebody's cycling through maybe 10 or 100 or 1,000 times to craft that prompt that's going to be able to get past your. So cool. Understand how that works. We're getting scanned millions of times a day from bad guys looking for vulnerabilities. And what do we do when we see something hit a threat intel list, or hit a thing? Well, we put a firewall block in place to prevent folks from being able to exploit that. Why aren't we doing that with LLMs when we see something hitting a guardrail?
Do you think it's like I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm like, as you're talking about this, I'm picturing, I can't remember where I saw this. Maybe it was on LinkedIn. You had an infographic of like the different parts of the restaurant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it made me think that, okay, so my question is, do you think it's because folks fundamentally don't understand how LLMs work, or like how AI works, and like they don't have that mental model, and that therefore they aren't prepared to actually put the security controls around it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that might be a part of it, right? I mean, if we're thinking about it working like magic, right? How do we do we secure magic?
You can't secure magic, George. I mean,
no. So I'm glad you mentioned it. So in Rise of the Machines, I knew right from the last book, Project Zero Trust. I heard from so many people that this book was really impactful to them because they were new to technology, right? They're coming in to work at the help desk, or they'd worked for years as a developer, but they didn't understand the big picture in security, or they worked in security, but they were a part of just one silo, like they were in the SOC or they were in identity, and they didn't see the big picture. So I really wanted to take that lesson into the sequel, if you will. It's really a sequel. It's the same character, same company. They're just dealing with AI now, and so there really needed to be a way of explaining how AI works to folks in an approachable way that anybody could figure out. And you already know how AI works because it works like a restaurant. Data comes in at the back, just like ingredients are delivered to the loading dock. You've got to clean and prep your ingredients, right, at a restaurant. You've got to clean and prep your data. You've got to have a recipe at a restaurant. Sometimes you're starting with an existing recipe. Everybody knows how to make a hamburger these days. You might be starting with an existing model that you've downloaded from Hugging Face, or you might be creating your own recipe, that's never been seen before. A model is just a recipe. You have tools, in the kitchen. You might have an oven or a fryer or a grill or whatever. With AI, right, there are lots of tools out there that help you support that, and you need to understand how to secure tools. You in a kitchen, you generally speaking want to keep the customers out of the kitchen, unless you're one of those fancy restaurants where you want people to watch. But that's serving infrastructure, right? We need to have our end users separated from the back end models and stuff. So okay, cool. Now that I'm thinking about AI like a restaurant, it's easy for me to understand. Like, okay, cool. I got to protect the data. Check. We know how to do that. We secure our S3 buckets. Hopefully y'all are securing your blob storage. Okay, tools. I know how to secure tools. I can think about that. For model ops, right? Maybe you've got a CI/CD pipeline to iterate on models. We know how to secure, and inject security into that pipeline to not slow folks down. And we understand about firewalls and public websites versus private ones, and how to separate those out, right? So this is all part of the stuff we already know how to do, and we can kind of help visualize, like, man, wouldn't it in a kitchen? Wouldn't it be bad if somebody poisons the ingredients? How would they do that? Wouldn't it be bad if somebody stole our data? Well, are people stealing your steaks out?
Like, Bob, we're out of onions. Who's stealing all the onions?
That's kind of prompt injection. So,
right.
Maybe you're not a customer of the restaurant. Maybe you're ordering Uber Eats. That's kind of like SaaS. Maybe you've got AI embedded in one of your tools that you didn't know was there, or anyway, I think again, this kind of more holistic view of how AI works is going to help you, especially as AI evolves, which it's going to continue to do rapidly over the next several years with agents or whatever new thing is going to come out next. But again, I think it's doable. And for the folks that are asking, like, oh my gosh, do we have to evolve security to meet AI? Well, it's the same strategy, right? We know how to do things. We're finding trust relationships, and we're trying to secure those points where where different systems interact.
Love it. I love the restaurant analogy. That's great. It's like we went from like McDonald's to like now this like super fancy restaurant. We just gotta we gotta like adapt things a little bit, make sure that everything's running smoothly. In the last couple of minutes here, so we had one of our LinkedIn fans, right, wrote in with a question about what is if you were to say, like, what is the most important mental, like, mind shift that a developer needs to make when it comes to zero trust, what do you think that is?
So I worked at a startup 25 years ago, I guess, and we were an agile shop before it was really called agile. And they had their use cases, their cards to develop, and we also at the same time worked with our developer team to have these misuse case cards, right? So we thought about it at the beginning. I like to call it a pre-mortem, right at the beginning of a sprint or a project or what have you. You think about all the things that could go wrong before they go wrong in the project, and you try and solve them along the way. Not that you're necessarily going to be perfect and get everything, but it's much better to do a pre-mortem than a post-mortem because you've been breached or whatever, and you've got to figure out what went wrong after the fact. When it is, the part of the reason why I think zero trust is the best strategy out there is because it's a strategy for prevention. I mean, prevention's worth a pound of cure. We know it's the most efficient and cost-effective way of running your security program.
That's awesome. Love that. Thinking about, what can go wrong? Just simply asking, what can go wrong, right? Like that threat modeling mindset. This has been so helpful. Do you have any parting words for engineers who are listening to the show?
You sent over some additional questions, and I just want to say, some folks, you didn't get to any Redditors that said, zero trust is too expensive.
I don't know if I came across that, but yeah, I can imagine that they, just from like a resource standpoint, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very aware of that, and I think that one of the other comments or questions that you had in your list was like, okay, if I just copy the Department of Defense's zero trust strategy or a Fortune 100's zero trust strategy, how do I bring that into my organization? Well, it's about scale. So if you go back to one of the books, there is a design methodology for zero trust that we walk through, and again, when you're thinking about aligning with the business, part of what you do when you align with the business is you understand the resources that you have today, and you don't have to have a bunch of new tools that you have to go out and buy. You think about the team that you have, you think about the tools you have. Can you harden your configs? Can you look for opportunities to streamline. And, again, this is one of the mistakes I made early on. We went super granular in terms of the policies we had, so much so that it became, too comprehensive, too onerous to support. So think about the scale of your operation. Every tool that I ever look at, I'm infamous with my teams to like, okay, how much operational overhead is this going to add, right?
Yeah.
I want us to be thinking about not just features, but also the support costs, because that limits our scale. And from a design perspective, I know you think about this, but how do we work with and collaborate with our vendors to streamline that process to make sure that it's not an onerous process to onboard. And man, I think zero trust is the best strategy for us, maybe the only one to secure our organizations effectively.
Love that. There's like I feel like a two-pronged, like your last statement about making sure that it's not going to increase the burden, right? Like you can think of that from a product perspective. If you are building a zero trust product and thinking about, are you just adding more complexity and more burden onto your users? And then also from the organizational standpoint of like,
totally,
we're bringing in this new tool, like, is it just going to add more complexity, more confusion, or just blah? George, this has been so fun. I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast. Just a real joy to talk to you. Thank you
so much, Heidi. It was great spending the last hour with you.
Thanks for listening to the VIA Knowledge Hub podcast. If you know someone who might like this episode, we would love for you to share it.